We said we've had an influx of people ringing about allergies at the moment. Spring, but also food allergies, and particularly things like the old lactose and gluten and that sort of thing, and sort of really talking about why this is so big and why people's immune systems are so challenged these days. And I know it's one of those things we've sort of chatted about a few times, but I think people are getting more and more confused about what they need to do and about what really helps and about what really sorts these things out.
Well, it's an ever-increasing problem.
Oh, it hugely is.
It's not gluten, it's lactose, and if it's not that, it's something else,
keeping our kids
isn't it? Yep.
too much in a sterilised environment,
Yeah.
keeping them indoors, not letting them get outside?
Yeah, I've sort of seen 3 different things on TV lately. There was a show on SBS about allergies, and there were 2 different Dr. Oz episodes that I sort of watched, and it was really good because in the 3 of those, it sort of said pretty much everything that a whole bunch of my seminars over, say, the last 5 years have sort of been discussing and talking about, and where research is going. And the one on SBS was talking about the fact that because kids aren't outside very much, you know, compared to when we were kids, sort of, jumping into dirty rivers and creeks and things and climbing trees and doing all these things, being told the second you got home from school, get outside, come back in when the sun's going down. So we all spent a lot of time outdoors. You didn't get to spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours on your iPods or TVs or anything every day. So one of the doctors on the SBS one was talking about the fact that a lot of our good bacteria comes from our environment outside. So when we're spending all our time inside and then we're using stuff to sterilise the environment all the time, that's sterilising our bacteria sprays, as well.
Yes,
yeah, absolutely. And so many people keep them in their handbag, and I'm not disagreeing with this, and they spray their supermarket trolleys and all sorts of things.
A lot of people take them on aircraft.
Yes. So, and what's happening
Which
is...
I can understand.
I can understand it as well. But are they doing anything to reboost the good guys? So it's one thing killing off the bad guys, but a lot of people are never really doing anything to get those good guys re-inoculated in their systems again. The 2 shows, anyway, so the SBS one was really neat because they were talking about the statistics in the UK being very similar to that over here, which is about 1 in 6 people having allergies, but not just sneezing when spring hits or not just getting a bellyache after a big fat latte or something. We're talking about people with eczema and dermatitis and chronic belly aches and chronic diarrhea and constipation and headaches and migraines and chronic fatigue. We're talking really big stuff. So not just the little bits and pieces that, you can go grab a Clarentine and stop yourself sneezing, or you can go grab a bottle of Yakult and sort of make your tummy feel better. Those people are sort of lucky because the little things are really sorting them out, and that's fine. So the 2 Dr. Oz things, and I know we've chatted about these separately in the past before, but they were really nice to see these 2 episodes so closely together. One of them, once again, he was talking about GMO foods. Now, we're not quite as bad as in America, but we're getting close. Both sides of government really believes in genetically modified foods. Now, basically in America, about 80% of their food is GMO. So anything that we which is huge.
Yeah.
So anything that we import from America, you can imagine if it's got sugar, it's from genetically modified sugar beets. If it's from corn, it's GMO corn. If it's from wheat, it's GMO wheat, because you can bet your bottom dollar if these guys are actually making foods that are then to be imported over to Australia, they're not going to be spending money on the best quality foods that they can.
There is a very interesting side story to that. A few years ago, there was a bad famine on the western coast of Africa.
Yes.
And America, as usual, first to assist with food supplies and so forth. And they brought in this GMO, genetically modified grain. I can't think which grain it was.
Yes.
And the government of this country, which was suffering badly, refused to have that grain landed because it would interfere with their natural crops.
Wow, fantastic.
Yep.
Because places like India, I mean, this is an awful thing to say, but GMO foods are the number 1 reason for farmers committing suicide because they are not getting the yields. It's costing them way too much money. They're simply not getting what they're told from the big companies that sell them the seeds, that they're told, hey, you're in you're in drought-ridden India. You need these seeds because you're going to get a better yield and it's going to cost you less in the long term. It's costing them a lot more. And they're not getting what they need to actually... So it's a number 1 reason for suicide over there. So, but that's sort of beside the point when we're... But, it's a big thing.
It's not really.
So the problem with GMO foods is that our bodies, we're only within, like, say, 30 years of, well, actually 100 since we first genetically modified wheat, which was just after World War I, and I know I've told that story many times on here. But I was chatting to someone yesterday, and he was saying that they re-modified it again in 1985. So back after World War I, they made it so that there was 2.5 times more gluten in the wheat. In 1985, they made it so that there was 10 times the gluten. And at the time, there was some study that sort of said, hey, you know, bodies aren't going to be able to break down this amount of gluten. So it wasn't doing well in their, you know, little monkeys or rats or whatever they were doing their studies on. But of course, in America, the food industry gets to regulate what they believe is and isn't. There's no independent people that come in.
Back once the decision's made.
No, exactly. There's no one out there going, gee, what's GMO food doing to our immune system? What's GMO, you know, so what's happened with genetically modified foods over the years is that because they're supposed to be drought resistant and pesticide resistant and herb, you know, sort of resistant and that sort of thing, they're getting stronger and stronger nasty chemicals in them that are pest resistant. Right, but they're getting stronger each time. So because they make one lot of genetically modified things and all of a sudden these weeds grow around them, they go, gee, that didn't work very well. So then they do. So basically now the combination of things that are in them, it's destroying our immune system. So when we are eating genetically modified food, once again, if we're strong immune system-wise, it may not affect us at all. Or at least not in a way, you know, until
it has to affect you somehow.
In some way, yes. At some stage down, it might just be heart disease or diabetes or cancer or something that, you know, 1 in 8 of us get anyway. So it might just not be something now.
Good, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Well,
Larraine looks at me and I look at her.
I'm just wondering, how do we know it is genetically modified?
Oh, we don't have to say in Australia. There is absolutely nothing that says that they have to tell us. Now, the problem is that they're genetically modifying things like, say, tomatoes. So one of the things that they've got in a lot of tomatoes these days is something from, there's a fish component that's in the GMO. Now, if I'm a vegetarian and I'm eating my tomatoes, I'm assuming as a vegetarian that I'm eating vegetables. 100%. So if I've got a tomato that's been genetically modified with a fish and I'm allergic to fish, I can't even avoid fish because it's in the tomato and we're not told about it. So
that's the ones I've been buying. I've got thick skin, that's all. Very thick.
So the only way to avoid genetically modified food is by eating organic, because you can't have an organic genetically modified food.
That's so expensive. I mean, where do you win? It is so expensive.
Yeah. So, well, once again, it comes down to your health and what is most important to people. So, so that was one thing. Then they were talking about, and I know we've chatted about this before, and once again, I'm talking America because I saw Dr. Oz this week, but 80% of the antibiotics used in America is in their food supply. So it's in chickens, it's in beef, it's in pork, it's in basically turkey and that sort of thing. So 80% of the antibiotic use in America is their animals.
Is that in Australia as well, or are we just talking about
We're
America?
getting there in Australia. Now, do you know the number one reason they give antibiotics to animals?
Well, I guess...
it seems obvious, but I'll just ask the question.
No, they don't get ill.
No, it's a growth promoter. Makes them get fat faster. Antibiotics. So imagine what that's doing to us as a human. Isn't that interesting? So yes, they're giving it to absolutely healthy animals from day one.
They feed it.
They feed them antibiotics. And then they can say that they're not using hormones, because hormones are not antibiotics. So then the farmers get to say, no, we don't use hormones in our animals. And all these companies can say, we have hormone-free beef, we have hormone-free pork, we have hormone-free chicken.
So wrong, isn't it?
It doesn't mean squat unless it's organic. So, and really it comes down to what's the most important. You know, so with some, like I think the green leafies, they have the biggest amounts of pesticides in them. So if you can buy those ones organic, or at least get a little garden patch going in the backyard.
I've got one started.
Yeah,
kale.
So it's one of those things kale has about 13 to 15 pesticides on it if it's not organic. It's one of the highest uses of pesticides. So here's this super food that everyone's using.
What about rocket and
same again?
Because I buy the pre-packaged.
Yeah, But
from Coles.
if you go to plant your own and you buy seedlings,
Yes.
how do we know that's not genetically modified?
You'd have to buy ones that say organic.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't know if seeds... the way you'd know is afterwards, do you get a second batch out of them?
Yeah.
Like if you grow some tomatoes out of a packet,
Yeah.
and then you get the tomato seeds and you try to grow them, they don't work, they will be genetically
I know
modified.
a friend of mine who's a farmer out of Celiac, he's mainly beef, but he does grow crops.
Yeah.
And he was telling me years ago, this would be 15 years ago, that they're now having to purchase seed for planting.
Yes.
Which will produce one crop.
Yeah.
Then they have to go back next season and repurchase.
Yeah.
So there's a cartel starting off there that's going to control food supply.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is really scary. And there's a couple of, because one of the big companies that makes these things is Monsanto. So there's a huge thing worldwide that's quite anti-Monsanto because they've got their pockets in all the governments around the world. And basically it's one of those things where countries are suing them because, and Monsanto is suing back, because they are creating such big health issues. So it's creating a huge issue because they are linked in with pharmaceuticals, they're linked in with many, many things. So these companies are really quite huge, and they're not just about growing wheat, they're not just about food production, they are, they're making money out of lots and lots of things.
So getting back to these young kids who have
yes.
situations where
Allergies.
they cannot put the finger on how to resolve the allergy.
Yeah. So what ends up happening when we've got food supplies with it, so a lot of these GMO foods have got antibiotics in them as well as pesticides. So when we actually eat those foods, it's destroying our gut flora. Now I know there's a lot of ridiculousness on TV. I hear people talking about it on all sorts of shows and they don't get it. So basically we have 10 times more cells in our gut than we have cells in our body. So we're talking trillions of bacteria, trillions. So if every time we're eating genetically modified food or animals with antibiotics in them and these sort of things, we're destroying our gut flora. You can't not be. It comes down to the combination of other ththings we're having in our diet as to whether or not we're doing too much damage, whether we're going forwards or whether we're going backwards with our health. So what ends up happening is that these, because it often starts with the little kids, because you can imagine it's these poor parents who've got kids with tummy aches every day of their lives, or eczema so bad that they're being wrapped in cotton wool every night before bed.
I have seen that.
Oh, it's really sad. So what you need to do is really start quenching that immune system overload. So from a naturopathic perspective, it is yes, we tell people when they can to buy as much organic as they can, to filter their water supply. If they can't buy organic, you buy fresh from the farms. If you can't buy fresh from the farms, you get it at the local markets. You just go those steps closer. You buy the things at Coles and Woolies that say they're organic. Yeah. You sort of do the best you can with the money you've got.
And get the kids outside and playing outside.
Absolutely.
Rather than sitting in playing these computer games.
What's the most common allergy that you find?
Gluten.
It is gluten.
Oh, absolutely.
I can't handle it.
30% of Australians have got the celiac gene, but only about 3% of people who have celiac. No, only about 3% of people who actually have the symptoms will be diagnosed celiac. So it has to be so bad to have actually a small intestine biopsy. Basically, the villi in the small intestine have to be totally munted. They take a big chunk of the small intestine, have a look at it. But really, that's also a sign, by the time those little villi, the little things like sea anemones, so the little things in the gut that basically release all the enzymes to help you digest your meals, they've been munted by lots of antibiotics, lots of painkillers, these sort of things that we're, giving kids from the moment they're born a lot of the times. Those things all destroy these villi in the intestines as well. So by the time kids are 2, 3, 4 years old and starting to show up as having fairly major allergies, we've already done some fairly major digestive damage just by the normal things we're given. So unless parents are proactive in going, okay, I know my child needs antibiotics because they've got a nasty earache, what do I need to do to counterbalance it? And one doctor at a seminar last year was saying 1 dose of antibiotics, you need a year of probiotics to counterbalance that. You can create some really, really major damage in the gut.
It's very sad because, mums out there try and give their newborns the best start in life,
Yes.
the best foods. They'll pay the extra $1.
Yes.
And yet, really, we don't know what's in the foodstuffs.
That's exactly
Well,
right.
that's right. You know, doctors are stopping a lot of this antibiotic
Yes.
giving. You know, we're all aware of it now.
Yeah.
And the big bugs are taking over because of it, overuse of it. And yet you're saying that it's in these foods and we don't know.
Exactly. And Dr. Oz was saying the other day, I love Dr. Oz, just throwing that out there. So one of the things he was saying, that instead of hospitals being those places where you pick up your superbugs these days, they're growing in our homes because of our sterile environments.
Right.
We're growing in our homes because of the foods we're
My
preparing.
home's not sterile, I can tell you.
Well, it's the best way to be. Open those darn windows.
Yeah.
Stop using the air
Yeah.
conditioners. You know, it's sort of like go to a local creek and have a
Get back
swim
to
in it. You know,
basics.
it's
Sorry?
really
Get back to basics.
go for a bushwalk.
Well, I think my home is like that. It's very basic. You know.
Yeah, so it's
I mean, I like it clean and dusted, but I don't go around, and I certainly don't carry that rubbish around in my handbag. I do
Yeah.
when I'm on a ship. If I'm on a ship or something, or I'm travelling
Yes.
overseas, and someone's got a bug, then I'll use it. But I don't have it in my handbag, so that if I'm going to the theatre and I put my hand on a seat
Yes.
or a rail or something, I
Well,
mean, you know,
Yeah,
you've
well,
got
also when you're flying too in those washrooms, toilets, washrooms as Americans like to say.
yeah.
Yeah, I can understand why people take those sprays there and
Yeah.
douse their hands in the handle. And
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's one of
they're not
those.
clean.
Yeah, no, and it takes time to actually reboost that immune system. But like probiotics. It's about getting that darn gut working better.
I have Yakult every morning that I wake up.
Yep.
The first thing, Yakult.
straight into it.
Yakult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get the sugar-free one?
No, because I think it's worse than the one with sugar. I don't mind the one. Because I don't have any sugar in my diet apart from wine.
Yep.
That's the only thing that I don't eat lollies, I don't eat chocolate very rarely.
No, I've stopped having
Ice cream,
sweet
nothing
biscuits.
like that.
Yes.
It's the only little bit of sugar that probably I have. So.
Sugar destroys probiotics. That's
Does
what
it?
they. Yeah.
Is that right?
Oh yeah.
I used
Absolutely.
I used to use the sugar-free one, but I thought.
Does it have aspartame in it?
But
I don't know, I'm gonna have
there
to-
was more sugar in the so low fat, not sugar free.
Oh,
it's
okay.
Low fat. So that's why I just take the ordinary.
I'll have
one.
to check out the ingredients again
Yeah.
next time, because I know they change these things every couple of years. Yeah.
Well,
And-
I just know I'm all for it because I used to have a lot of trouble with my
Yeah.
gut until I started doing that.
And one of my poor mums yesterday, she was talking to me about her two kids who both have nightmares. They both wake up screaming in the middle of the night with different things going on. One's 2 and one's 9. And you sort of start thinking about it. And when we were going through their diet, she was really embarrassed because both her and her hubby, they've got into that bad habit of going to the shops and buying the chocolate milk, going to the shops, buying the lollipop, going to the shop, so
Sugar.
it is. And I don't know if you saw the Jamie Oliver thing on sugar last Sunday night. Amazing. He actually put together a really healthy meal for the day. And by the end of the day, it was about 25 teaspoons of extra sugar in these things, where most of them, you were sort of talking bran flakes, you were talking pasta, you were talking normal things that you had a look and you go, well, that's a pretty healthy mix-up. But he was stunned, and he's pretty sensible.
Yeah.
But man, they were showing the side effects of diabetes and this sort of stuff around the world. Kids having teeth removed purely because of sugar intake. People having, like in the UK, 7,000 amputations a year purely because of sugar.
Diabetes.
In Mexico, 10 times the amount with twice the population. Just hideous,
Right.
because they don't have the money. And everywhere in the world is getting worse with diabetes. Nowhere's improving.
No.
So, and we're just as bad. We are doubling our diabetes every 2 to 3 years in Australia. It is totally hideous.
Sugar.
So it really
Yeah,
is one of
like
those
that,
things
like
that we
that.
need to start looking at so much more seriously.
So, Mum or Dad, if your little one, the little
Yep.
lepers, have an allergy, the lady to see is Madonna Guy of New Leaf Natural Therapies. Your telephone number, if you'd like to make an appointment, is 33486098. And Madonna, where are you? Wynnum?
We're in Wynnum, 94 Edith Street.
There you are, 94 Edith Street, Wynnum, for New Leaf Natural Therapies, and we'll have you back next Thursday. It's an interesting subject that we could talk for hours on it.
Oh,
Hours
Yes.
and hours.
Keeping us busy.
Thank you, Madonna.
Thank
See
you
next
next week.
Thursday.
Bye.